And we also have to mention that while this was going on, deputies in Houston, they also confirmed to Click 2 Houston that they responded twice last week to David's Cypress, Texas home after security alarms were triggered.
Well, that's the first I'm hearing of this, but it's interesting to think that somebody may have tried to make entry to that property. That could be an effort by somebody to remove evidence that was there. That's the obvious connection to this Los Angeles.
When you're dealing with a body that's as decomposed as this, how do authorities analyze that evidence? How do they handle that evidence? And the idea that this body was severely decomposed.
The only time the identity of the victim is a problem for the killer is if there's some known relation. Well, we have to kind of keep the Occam's razor principle in mind. I mean, this vehicle was registered to David Burke. It was apparently towed from across the street from a home that he was renting. So the simplest theory would be that this crime happened in or near the vehicle and likely by David or somebody close to him with access to.
Is anyone else wondering why David hasn't been arrested for the murder of Celeste yet? I've been alive for 23 years, all of which in California and Los Angeles, in criminal law, Northern criminal law. That's my expertise. And I'll tell you this, if you found yourself with a dead child in your backseat who was reported kidnapped or missing a year ago, you'd be in jail. So what is taking them so long to arrest David is the question.
In a case that's gripped the nation, there's still no official suspect named in the tragic death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Yet, recent moves by the APD, like raiding David Anthony Burke's Hollywood Hills home and seizing his computers, along with David's own actions, from hiring a top-tier lawyer to abruptly canceling tours and transferring properties, quietly scream that he's the prime person of interest. But hold on, what if the real clues point elsewhere? The Tesla at the heart of it all, with its eerie abandoned state and bizarre details inside, whispers a different name entirely. Could someone close to David be pulling the strings? Let's dive in and question everything. First, we'll revisit the strange anomalies in that Tesla to sketch what the perpetrator might have done, and analyze if David could really be capable of it all. One of the most perplexing aspects surrounding the discovery in the Tesla involves the timeline of how the vehicle ended up in the impound lot. The car, registered in Texas, had been parked in a residential area of Hollywood Hills for an extended period, accumulating parking violations over several days before being towed. Reports indicate that neighbors had complained about a persistent, foul odor emanating from the vehicle, which prompted the eventual removal to the lot on Mansfield Avenue. Yet, despite these complaints, no one seemed to investigate the source of the smell until workers at the impound facility alerted authorities. This raises questions about why the odor went unaddressed for so long in a populated neighborhood, and whether the perpetrator deliberately chose a spot where the car could sit undisturbed, allowing time for the condition as reported to advance unnoticed. Furthermore, the vehicle's frunk, where the remains were found wrapped in a bag, suggests a calculated effort to conceal. But the lack of immediate detection points to a strange oversight in routine urban enforcement. Adding to the oddity, the Tesla had been abandoned with its audio system playing eerie music at a high volume throughout the day, disturbing residents enough to file complaints, but not enough to trigger an earlier inspection. This detail implies the culprit might have left the music on intentionally, perhaps as a distraction, or to mask any unusual sounds from the vehicle, creating an unsettling atmosphere that deterred closer scrutiny. Another unresolved issue pertains to the vehicle's movement and positioning prior to its towing. Records show the Tesla received its first parking ticket on August 27, followed by another on September 3, indicating it had been stationary for at least a week in violation of the 72-hour parking rule. However, estimates suggest the remains had been in the frunk for potentially 2 weeks before discovery on September 8, which doesn't align perfectly with the parking timeline. This discrepancy hints at the possibility that the car was relocated or planted at some point, perhaps after the incident occurred elsewhere, to allow for the condition as reported without immediate exposure. Why would the perpetrator risk leaving the vehicle in a public spot for such a duration, especially one near a high-profile location? It could indicate a hasty decision or an attempt to distance the scene from the actual site of the event, but the absence of surveillance footage capturing the abandonment leaves this as a lingering mystery. Moreover, the car's Texas plates in a California neighborhood add another layer of curiosity, as it might suggest the vehicle was driven across state lines at some point, though no travel logs have confirmed this. The frunk itself presents several strange elements that haven't been fully explained. Tesla vehicles are equipped with sensors that can detect and notify owners of unauthorized access to compartments like the frunk via a mobile app. If the frunk was open to place the remains inside, it's unclear why no alert was triggered or, if it was, why it went unaddressed. This could point to the perpetrator having knowledge of how to bypass such features or possessing access to the vehicle's systems, perhaps through a key fob or app credentials. The choice of the frunk over the more conventional trunk also stands out as unusual, given its smaller size and front positioning, which might have been selected for quicker access or to avoid detection during a casual glance at the rear of the car. Yet, despite these technological safeguards, no digital trail has surfaced linking the opening of the frunk to a specific time or individual, leaving investigators without a clear entry point for tracing the act. Compounding these puzzles is the reported presence of additional anomalies at the impound lot. Some accounts suggest that workers noticed not just one suspicious vehicle but potentially two with similar odors around the same time, though only one led to the discovery. This raises the question of whether the perpetrator used the busy lot environment to blend in, or if it was a coincidence that amplified the eerie nature of the find. The lot's protocols for checking impounded cars apparently delayed the alert to police, allowing days to pass before identification. Why wasn't a standard inspection conducted upon arrival? It seems the foul smell was initially attributed to something mundane, like spoiled food, which allowed the condition as reported to remain hidden longer. This oversight highlights a potential flaw in impound procedures, but it also suggests the culprit might have anticipated such delays, choosing a method of disposal that relied on bureaucratic inertia. Shifting focus to the actions that the perpetrator might have taken, several behaviors emerge from the details that paint a picture of deliberate planning mixed with apparent risks. The decision to use a high-end electric vehicle like the Tesla implies access to resources or familiarity with the owner, yet the abandonment in a visible spot contradicts typical efforts to hide evidence completely. Perhaps the culprit drove car to the Hollywood Hills after the incident, parked it in a way that violated local rules to ensure eventual towing, and left it with the audio system blaring unsettling sounds to ward off curious passersby. This could have been a tactic to create a buffer period, allowing natural processes to obscure forensic details without the need for further intervention. The wrapping of the remains in a bag further indicates an attempt at containment, possibly to minimize leaks or odors initially, though it ultimately failed as the smell became noticeable. Another behavior worth noting is the potential relocation of the vehicle post-incident. If the estimates hold that the remains were in the frunk for weeks, but the parking tickets span only a shorter period, the perpetrator might have initially stored the car elsewhere, perhaps a private garage or remote area, before moving it to the residential street. This staged abandonment could explain the lack of immediate connections, as it breaks the chain of custody and introduces variables like multiple handlers or borrowed access. The choice to leave the car unlocked or with systems active, including the possible music playback, suggests either carelessness or a psychological element, where the culprit wanted to instill unease in the surroundings, almost like a macabre signature. In piecing together a summary of the perpetrator's possible activities through these peculiar details, a sequence emerges that starts with the acquisition or use of the Tesla, likely after the event occurred in a separate location. The culprit may have opened the frunk using insider knowledge to avoid alerts, placed the wrapped remains inside, and then driven the vehicle to a preliminary hiding spot for initial concealment. After a period, perhaps to monitor for any immediate fallout, the car was repositioned to the Hollywood Hills street, with the audio system intentionally set to play disturbing music at high volume to deter approach. This allowed time for the condition as reported to develop, while parking violations accumulated, ensuring the vehicle would be towed without direct intervention. Once in the impound lot, the smell finally prompted discovery, but the delay had already complicated timelines and evidence. Such steps reflect a mix of calculated evasion and bold risks, exploiting urban anonymity and vehicle technology in ways that obscure direct trails. Despite the vivid picture these actions paint of a methodical offender, none of the traces definitively tie back to any specific individual, especially the prime suspect in the eyes of the community, David. The vehicle's registration offers a surface-level link, but without fingerprints, DNA matches, or eyewitness accounts of the abandonment, it remains circumstantial at best. Sensors and app notifications, while potentially alerting an owner, could have been disabled or ignored, leaving no digital footprint to follow. The music playback, though eerie, doesn't point to a motive or identity, and the bag used for wrappings no unique identifiers like purchase records or material origins. Even the timeline discrepancies, which suggest relocation, lack supporting evidence from traffic cameras or GPS data, as if the perpetrator anticipated and avoided surveillance hotspots. This absence of concrete connections extends to forensic aspects as well. While the condition as reported suggests a prolonged period in the frunk, lab tests for substances or residues inside the vehicle haven't publicly yielded matches to any known associates. The impound lot's multiple vehicles with odors introduced doubt about exclusivity, potentially diluting focus on this one car. Moreover, the towing process itself involved multiple handlers, from neighbors calling in complaints to lot workers, none of whom reported seeing suspicious activity around the Tesla prior to its removal. This chain of custody breaks create gaps where evidence could have been lost or overlooked, further insulating the perpetrator from direct implication. The perpetrator's apparent familiarity with the vehicle's features adds another layer of intrigue without resolution. Knowing how to access the frunk without triggering prominent alerts implies either technical savvy or prior experience with the model, yet no service records or app logs have surfaced to narrow this down. The choice of location in Hollywood Hills, an area known for its winding streets and limited oversight, might indicate local knowledge, but without correlating movements from cell data or witnesses, it stays speculative. Even the reported swatting incidents at a related property in Texas, which occurred around the time of heightened scrutiny, could be seen as distractions, but they don't forge a direct link to the core act. Financial maneuvers of David around the same period, such as property transfers, hint at preparatory actions, yet they don't connect to the physical handling of the vehicle or remains. The Tesla's dense and unreported status as missing suggests neglect or intentional disuse, but without theft reports or insurance claims, it doesn't pinpoint responsibility. Toxicology results, still pending, might clarify the sequence, but even if they reveal substances, tracing their administration remains elusive without contextual ties. The overall pattern of these unresolved elements creates a frustrating mosaic actions that scream intentionality, like the staged abandonment and auditory distraction, but forensics that evaporate at every turn. The perpetrator seems to have exploited the vehicle's modern conveniences against themselves, turning sensors into silent witnesses and apps into dead ends. This deliberate opacity ensures that while the sequence of events can be imagined, assigning accountability slips through the cracks, leaving the case in a limbo of suspicions without anchors. The bag's material and method of wrapping offer another avenue unexplored in depth. Was it chosen for its durability to contain during transport, or was it improvised? Without sourcing it to a specific purchase or location, it remains a generic clue, unable to forge a path back to the originator. Similarly, the impound lot's delay in alerting authorities, attributed to routine overload, might have been anticipated by someone familiar with such facilities. But proving that intent requires more than conjecture. In reflecting on these peculiarities, the perpetrator's profile emerges as one of calculated audacity, selecting a conspicuous vehicle for concealment, layering distractions like noise, and relying on systemic delays to erode evidence. This approach, while risky, has so far thwarted direct linkages, turning what should be a straightforward trail into a web of what-ifs. The absence of digital breadcrumbs, despite the Tesla's connectivity, underscores a possible premeditation in evading tech traces, perhaps through manual overrides or external interference. The accomplice. So what happened if David got an accomplice right from the beginning? One hypothesis that has gained traction suggests the possibility of accomplices assisting in the concealment efforts, given the absence of direct physical evidence linking David to the handling of the remains despite numerous circumstantial indicators, such as the vehicle's ownership and reported personal connections. In this scenario, an accomplice could have managed the logistics of hiding the body in a way that minimized traceable residue, perhaps by processing it at a separate location before placing it in the Tesla's frunk and abandoning the car. This would account for why forensic examinations have not yielded fingerprints, DNA, or other direct ties, implying a division of labor where one person orchestrates while another executes the more hands-on tasks, exploiting access to properties or vehicles without drawing immediate suspicion. Such collaboration might explain the calculated abandonment in a spot that allowed time for natural degradation, reducing the likelihood of recoverable evidence while shifting focus away from the primary figure under scrutiny. Among potential accomplices, Josh Marshall stands out as the most speculated candidate, primarily due to his long-standing professional and personal ties to David as his manager and the founder of Mogul Vision, a role he's held for about 4 years. Marshall's involvement in securing the Hollywood Hills rental property for David places him in close proximity to the area where the Tesla was left, and reports of a red Tesla owned by Marshall parked in the garage of that home raise questions about his potential access to similar vehicles or spaces that could facilitate discrete movements. This connection became more pronounced when Marshall abruptly terminated the lease on the property shortly after LAPD executed a search warrant there on September 18, 2025, during which computers and other items were seized, an action that some interpret as an attempt to distance himself from any lingering scrutiny. Marshall has vehemently denied any knowledge or participation, stating in multiple videos posted on TikTok in early October 2025 that he had zero knowledge of anything. related to the matter, emphasizing that his work is 95% remote and doesn't require daily in-person interactions with David, as other team members handle routine tasks. In one such video, he directly addressed accusations like, "Josh did it," clapping back at what he called misinformed speculation from online commentators, insisting that his role is strictly managerial and not entangled in personal affairs. A key story surrounding Marshall involves an email reportedly sent by Celeste's family in 2024, alleging that she was staying with David and seeking information or intervention. Marshall has publicly refuted ever receiving or responding to such correspondence, claiming no awareness of Celeste's situation or her true age, which some associates believed to be 18 or 19 based on shared perceptions within David's circle. He avoided mentioning Celeste's name directly in his statements, which observers speculate might stem from legal advice to limit exposure, though he broadly dismissed the rumors as unfounded. This denial came amid growing online chatter, where netizens pointed to Marshall's full-time residence with his wife and children elsewhere, suggesting he could have provided remote oversight or logistical support without being physically present, leveraging his position to protect David's interests. For instance, some theories posit that Marshall, with his access to the rental home and potential familiarity with the Tesla's key systems, could have assisted in relocating the vehicle or erasing digital traces, acting as an accessory after the fact rather than a primary perpetrator. Adding to the intrigue, unsubstantiated rumors have circulated about a bracelet with the letter M found on the remains, which a few online speculators linked to Marshall's initial, though no official confirmation exists, and Marshall himself has not addressed this claim. Marshall's initial silence following the discovery fueled further suspicion, as he only broke it after weeks of mounting pressure from public discourse, choosing social media to issue his rebuttals rather than formal channels. In his posts, he described feeling harassed by the accusations, urging people to wait for official findings and criticizing the spread of unverified narratives that painted him as complicit. He reiterated that his professional relationship with David is business-oriented, focused on career management through mogul vision, and not indicative of deeper involvement in private matters. Despite these assertions, the timing of his lease termination and the property's proximity to the abandonment site continue to draw attention, with some viewing his remote work setup as a convenient alibi that allows for plausible deniability while enabling behind-the-scenes coordination. If Marshall were indeed an accomplice, his role might involve utilizing his managerial authority to shield David, such as arranging property changes or monitoring communications, thereby exploiting his position to facilitate evasion without direct exposure. This accomplice theory neatly addresses several lingering inconsistencies in the case. For starters, it explains the stark lack of direct evidence tying David to the scene, such as absent DNA or fingerprints on the remains or vehicle, by positing that another individual handled the physical aspects, leaving David insulated from forensic links. The complex timeline, with periods of absence and reappearance, could be clarified through an accomplice's assistance in temporarily sheltering or relocating during those intervals before the final placement in the Tesla. Behaviors indicative of cover-up, like the transfer of Texas properties to David's mother in October 2025 or the swatting incidents at the home, might involve coordinated efforts to divert attention or secure assets, with the accomplice managing details to avoid traceable involvement. Technical challenges, such as abandoning the car with loud music to mask odors or preparing the remains in a manner that required multiple steps, suggest the need for more than one person to execute without detection, distributing tasks to minimize risks and leverage specialized access. Beyond Marshall, the hypothesis opens doors to other figures in David's orbit who might fit similar profiles, though none have garnered as much focus due to their lesser visibility. The overall framework posits that collaboration allowed for a more sophisticated operation, where one party provides the means, like vehicle access or property use, while another ensures the execution remains clean, ultimately completing the investigative trail. This division could account for why, despite abundant indirect signs pointing toward David, no smoking gun has emerged, leaving room for doubt amid the speculation. An alternative direction to consider is the possibility of a framing scenario, where someone deliberately used the Tesla to implicate David, capitalizing on his public profile and known associations to shift blame. This could explain the abundance of superficial connections without substantive proof, as the true perpetrator might have accessed the vehicle through indirect means, planting the remains to exploit David's vulnerabilities like his lyrics or property dealings. Such a setup would highlight how circumstantial elements amplify suspicion, while core evidence remains absent, potentially orchestrated by an adversary familiar with David's circle. One possible sequence of events begins with Celeste forming an online connection in 2022, when she was around 11 or 12 years old, leading to a relationship that evolved into something inappropriate. involving grooming and underage interactions. Over time, this dynamic deepened, with communications building a bond that crossed boundaries, setting the stage for later developments. By January 2024, Celeste appeared alongside David in a livestream, interacting in a way that suggested familiarity, perhaps as part of ongoing virtual engagements that blurred the lines between fan and something more personal. This visibility hinted at a growing closeness, though it remained under the radar for many outside their immediate circle. Fast forward to April 2025, when Celeste went missing for the first time from her home in Lake Elsinore, potentially heading to Hollywood to meet David in person, drawn by the established report. During this period, she might have stayed in locations tied to him, experiencing the realities of that connection up close, before returning after about a month, possibly due to family pressure or a temporary resolution. However, the pull proved strong, and by May 2025, she disappeared again, this time more permanently, likely ending up at the Hollywood Hills residence rented for David by his manager, Josh Marshall. In this setting, the relationship could have intensified, with Celeste integrating into a private environment away from oversight, where daily life intertwined with the complexities of their dynamic. The turning point might have come toward the end of August 2025, inside that Hollywood Hills home, where tensions escalated into a fatal outcome, perhaps stemming from an overdose during a moment of vulnerability, or a heated argument fueled by jealousy, echoing themes in David's lyrics that spoke to possessiveness and emotional turmoil, or even escalating to physical confrontation. Whatever the catalyst, the result left Celeste lifeless in the residence, prompting an urgent need for discretion. At this juncture, an accomplice like Marshall could have stepped in, leveraging his access to the property he had arranged, to assist in the immediate aftermath. The process of managing the situation might have involved careful preparation to contain and transport, using materials on hand to wrap securely, minimizing any immediate mess or detection. With the Tesla readily available, registered to David, but potentially accessible through shared keys or app controls, the next step could have seen the wrapped form placed in the frunk, chosen for its discrete front location and smaller space that might evade casual notice. To avoid triggering any app notifications or sensors, the accomplice might have used a key card or familiarized overrides, ensuring the compartment sealed without alerts. Initially, the vehicle could have been moved to a secluded spot, like a private garage associated with the rental or another nearby site, allowing a brief holding period to assess risks and plan the final abandonment. This interim step would provide time to strategize, perhaps cleaning any residual traces from the home while the car sat out of sight, buying precious hours or days. Around August 27, 2025, the Tesla might then have been repositioned to a residential street in Hollywood Hills, parked in violation of local rules to invite eventual towing without direct involvement. To further obscure, the audio system could have been left blaring loud, unsettling music, serving as a deterrent to curious neighbors, while masking emerging odors over the coming weeks. This deliberate setup allowed natural processes to take hold, complicating any future analysis, as the vehicle accumulated parking tickets, first on the 27th, then another on September 3, ensuring it would be removed by authorities rather than retrieved personally. The accomplice, possibly driving the car to this spot, could have done so to establish an alibi for David, keeping him distanced from the act while the plan unfolded. By September 8, 2025, after the second ticket prompted towing to the impound lot, the Tesla sat among other vehicles, its secret hidden until workers noticed the intensifying smell, leading to the alert and subsequent discovery. The delay in inspection at the lot, due to standard procedures handling numerous impounds, played into the strategy, granting extra time before identification. Throughout, the handling aimed to erase direct traces, through containment, relocation, and timed abandonment, yet the vehicle's registration inevitably created an indirect link back to David, serving as the one unavoidable thread in an otherwise obscured chain. This methodical approach, if involving an accomplice, would distribute the risks, making reconstruction more challenging for investigators. An alternative angle worth clarifying involves the notion of someone deliberately setting up David to take the fall, using his Tesla as the centerpiece to shift blame. In this framing scenario, an external party, perhaps a rival or someone aware of the underlying dynamics, could have orchestrated the placement to exploit the surface-level associations, capitalizing on elements like unsettling lyrics that evoke themes of loss and regret, or shared symbols such as matching tattoos marked with "esh," or even documented images and videos showing proximity. This setup would create a web of indirect signs that fuel speculation without solid groundwork, drawing attention to David's prominence and making him an easy target for public outcry. The framer might have been someone privy to insider details, gleaned from online chats or overheard conversations, who targeted Celeste to inflict maximum damage on David's reputation, knowing his celebrity status would amplify the fallout. by accessing the Tesla, perhaps through opportunistic theft or borrowed means, and introducing the remains into the frunk. The act would mimic an inside job while leaving no personal imprints, relying on the vehicle's ownership to do the implicating. This could explain the bold abandonment near familiar territory, designed to heighten the apparent guilt without requiring the framer's ongoing involvement. David's potential vulnerabilities would play right into this trap, such as the failure to report the vehicle as missing despite visible dents and its unreported status, which might paint a picture of negligence or intent. Similarly, the transfer of Texas properties could be twisted to appear as preemptive asset protection, reinforcing a guilty facade, while denials from figures like Marshall might be perceived as coordinated cover, adding layers to the misdirection. If the outcome leaned toward something like an overdose, the framing becomes even more feasible, transforming the situation into one of mere concealment rather than outright aggression, lowering the stakes for the true culprit, while ensnaring David in endless doubt. This direction also sheds light on delays in official actions, as the abundance of red herrings could slow progress, compounded by conflicting accounts like a private investigator's claim of sighting Celeste alive in 2025 through recent photos, which muddle sequence and introduces doubt. The framer's strategy would thrive on such chaos, using David's public persona to sustain the narrative without needing ironclad ties, ultimately leaving the real sequence shrouded while scrutiny fits its elsewhere. David got framed. Focus on the blame-shifting scenario. Various individuals might target David due to underlying tensions amplified by circulating rumors. For instance, the bodyguard known as Marky Next Door, whose real name is Mark Morales, could have motives rooted in perceived conflicts arising from whispers about secret connections. Stories floating around suggest that Marky Next Door faced accusations of manipulating Discord messages through editing software to cast suspicion elsewhere, creating indirect friction as he repeatedly denied any role as a protector and made ambiguous admissions during a livestream while intoxicated about assisting in concealment efforts. This could stem from a desire to deflect attention or retaliate against being dragged into the surrounding drama, positioning David as a convenient scapegoat to shield his own reputation. Such narratives paint a picture of simmering resentment, where public denials only fuel speculation about hidden agendas and personal grudges that might prompt someone in his position to orchestrate a setup. Similarly, fanatics or detractors within the community might aim at David because of escalating backlash from group dynamics gone sour. Tales abound of former supporters turning hostile after claims of inappropriate interactions surfaced, leading to the deletion of discussions on the subreddit r/David, where David is suspected of holding moderator privileges. This has bred conflict as these individuals compile what they call evidence, including matched tattoos or archived chats, all aimed at derailing his career trajectory. Incidents like the reported swatting at his Texas residence add layers to the Discord, suggesting organized efforts to harass or intimidate, possibly as payback for perceived betrayals or to amplify negative publicity. These stories highlight how loyalty can flip into vendetta, with online mobs using digital tools to escalate personal animosities into broader campaigns that target David's public image and professional standing. Unidentified car thieves or rivals could also zero in on David owing to personal rivalries or competitive edges. Speculative accounts propose that someone with access exploited a Tesla vehicle to plant incriminating elements in the frunk, capitalizing a lack of a theft report to complicate matters and prolong scrutiny. This creates indirect clashes by entangling legal processes, potentially as a means to settle scores from undisclosed disputes or to gain an advantage in overlapping circles. The narratives often weave in ideas of opportunistic sabotage, where familiarity with routines or security lapses allows for such maneuvers, turning everyday oversights into weapons for long-term disruption. Supporting evidence for this blame-shifting framework draws from scattered rumors and recorded streams that hint at ulterior motives. Clips from Marky Next Door's appearances alongside figures like Adin Ross reveal vague confessions that align with notions of deflection, bolstering the idea that ambiguous statements serve to redirect focus away from potential culprits. These digital footprints, preserved in online archives, provide a trail of inconsistencies that supporters of the theory point to as indicators of orchestrated misdirection. Online backlash further reinforces this, with enthusiasts posting altered images and accounts of swatting incidents that demonstrate a clear drive to undermine credibility through coordinated chaos. Such actions, documented across platforms, suggest patterns of deliberate interference rather than random occurrences, lending credence to the possibility of a calculated effort to pin responsibility elsewhere. However, weaknesses abound in this narrative, primarily the absence of solid legal backing. Everything hinges on social media conjecture, with no substantiation from official channels like the LAP to validate any real conflicts or schemes. Speculations thrive in echo chambers but crumble under scrutiny, lacking forensic or documented proof to elevate them beyond hearsay. Denials from involved parties further erode the foundation. Marky Next Door and Josh Marshall have openly refuted connections or defended against implications, weakening claims that they might be orchestrators by presenting counter-narratives that emphasize innocence or unrelated involvement. Their public statements, often shared via video or posts, introduce doubt about malicious intent, suggesting that what appears as cover-up could simply be damage control in a viral storm. In the blame-framing scenario, a positive toxicology result for controlled substances would fundamentally undermine the hypothesis by introducing evidence of deliberate poisoning. This outcome shifts the narrative from a mere setup, where the body is simply placed to implicate someone, to a calculated act of harm, suggesting premeditation and direct involvement in causing death. For instance, detecting controlled substances or other toxins in the system points to an intentional administration, which complicates the idea that the incident was orchestrated solely to frame David without any underlying lethal intent. Such a finding elevates the case to one of active murder, eroding the foundation of the framing theory that relies on passive placement rather than aggressive intervention. Moreover, this positive result redirects suspicion squarely toward David or those in his immediate circle, as framing schemes typically avoid the risks associated with handling and administering controlled substances. In a pure setup, perpetrators mimic their actions to relocation or staging evidence, steering clear of substances that could leave traceable biological markers. However, if toxicology confirms the presence of these substances, it implies a deeper level of engagement, potentially linking back to individuals when access or motive to use them. This not only collapses the notion of David as an innocent victim of entrapment, but also amplifies scrutiny on his associations, questioning how such substances entered the equation without his knowledge or complicity. The breakdown occurs because framing hypotheses thrive on simplicity and deniability. Introducing controlled substances adds layers of complexity that demand explanations for sourcing, timing, and method of delivery. A positive test would thus invalidate the passive framing model, as it transforms the scenario into one where the harm was inflicted proactively, not just exploited after the fact. This pivot weakens defenses built around the idea of external sabotage, forcing a reevaluation of timelines and relationships that might otherwise support David's innocence. Furthermore, the presence of substances in toxicology reports could highlight inconsistencies in the framing narrative, such as the need for specialized knowledge or resources to administer them undetected initially. This evidence disrupts the hypothesis by suggesting that the act wasn't an opportunistic plant, but an orchestrated sequence involving substance use, thereby shifting the investigative lens inward rather than outward to distant suspects. In essence, it dismantles the core premise that David was targeted through nonviolent means, replacing it with a framework where active poisoning implicates closer parties. The true cover-up. Back to the side of accomplice. Josh Marshall's actions in the accomplice scenario point to several clear moves that could be interpreted as efforts to cover up involvement, starting with his official statements drawn from public declarations and press reports. He broke his silence on TikTok under the handle JMogul in late September 2025, posting a video where he firmly stated, "I have zero knowledge of anything," explicitly denying any awareness or connection to Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death. This came after weeks of speculation, positioning his response as a direct rebuttal to growing rumors. In the same video and subsequent posts, Marshall clarified that he does not reside at the Hollywood Hills house where David had stayed, a property he had rented for his client, and emphasized that none of his vehicles have ever been in California, aiming to sever any perceived ties to the location or potential evidence there. These denials were echoed in interviews with outlets like E! News and FXA, where he publicly defended David by dismissing conjectures as baseless, highlighting the absence of any evidence linking David to wrongdoing, and calling for an end to unfounded gossip that could harm reputations. Marshall also reached out to journalist Lauren Conlon to provide details, reiterating his lack of knowledge about the situation and suggesting he had consulted legal counsel to guide his statements, carefully avoiding direct mentions of Celeste's name to safeguard David's public image while maintaining a professional stance. Beyond these formal responses, rumors swirling from unverified sources and social media speculation paint a picture of more covert behaviors that could align with concealment efforts. Some discussions on X platforms suggest Marshall was aware of an email from Celeste's family in 2024 but denied it to obscure any prior knowledge, with his choice to first address the matter on TikTok seen as a tactic to bypass mainstream media and control the narrative through a platform where he could moderate comments and engagement. Whispers link him to a bracelet inscribed with M that Celeste was reportedly wearing when found, implying a hidden relationship or role in hiding details, though Marshall has outright rejected such claims in his videos. Further conjecture posits that he sought lawyer advice not just for public statements but to craft responses that evade specifics, like omitting Celeste's name entirely, which might minimize fallout for David while potentially withholding information. There's also talk that Marshall may have resisted turning over personal devices during any inquiries, a move that could preserve private communications or data, fueling theories of deeper involvement. These unconfirmed narratives, amplified by online communities, portray his remote work lifestyle, with 95% of duties handled from afar while living full-time with his wife and children, as a convenient setup for discrete coordination without physical presence, allowing him to manage logistics like property changes or communications behind the scenes. His clapbacks against accusations like, "Josh did it," in follow-up TikToks are viewed by some as defensive posturing, designed to deflect rather than fully disclose, adding layers to the perception of orchestrated protection. For the purpose, Josh Marshall and David share a professional relationship that spans about 4 years, with Marshall serving as David's manager and the founder of Mogul Vision, the company handling his career trajectory. This partnership has been instrumental in elevating David from an emerging artist to a recognized name in the music industry, with Marshall overseeing key aspects like tour scheduling, label negotiations, and brand collaborations. Their dynamic extends beyond mere business. Marshall has been involved in personal logistics, such as arranging housing and providing remote oversight, allowing him to maintain a close yet flexible connection despite living full-time with his family elsewhere. This setup enables Marshall to operate 95% remotely, delegating daily tasks to others while focusing on strategic decisions that benefit both parties financially and professionally. The trust built over time positions Marshall as a confidant, potentially privy to David's private matters, which could blur the lines between managerial duties and deeper involvement in his life. If David were to face arrest or legal consequences, the repercussions for Marshall would be profound, threatening the stability of his own career and financial interests. As David's primary manager, Marshall's income is heavily tied to the artist's success through commissions on tours, album sales, and endorsements. A scandal could lead to canceled deals, lost revenue, and a tarnished reputation for Mogul Vision, potentially deterring future clients. Beyond economics, Marshall's public image as a savvy industry figure would suffer, with any association to controversy inviting scrutiny that might expose his remote work model as insufficient oversight or worse, complicity. His family life could also be disrupted, facing harassment or media intrusion, amplifying personal stress in an already high-stakes environment. This interdependence creates a strong motive for Marshall to act as an accomplice, driven by self-preservation and loyalty. Protecting David from fallout would safeguard Marshall's livelihood, ensuring the continuation of profitable ventures like ongoing promotions and collaborations. By assisting in cover-up efforts, such as managing properties or communications, Marshall could mitigate risks to his own standing, viewing his role not just as a manager, but as a guardian of their shared success. The fear of losing everything built over years might push him toward actions that prioritize damage control, rationalizing involvement as necessary to maintain the empire they've co-created. In examining who bears responsibility in this accomplice scenario, various cases arise depending on the intent and roles involved. If the act was intentional, such as a premeditated outcome driven by personal motives like jealousy or concealment of prior misconduct, David would likely shoulder the primary blame as the principal actor, given his direct ties and potential emotional investment. Josh Marshall, in this instance, would function as an accessory, aiding in the aftermath through logistical support or evasion tactics, but not initiating the core event. This division stems from Marshall's managerial position, which positions him to react rather than instigate, though his knowledge of the situation could elevate his culpability if proven to extend beyond mere assistance. Conversely, if the scenario unfolded unintentionally, perhaps through negligence leading to an accidental fatality during a private encounter, David might still hold chief accountability for creating the risky environment, while Marshall's role would be limited to post-incident cover, making him secondary but still liable for enabling the evasion. Another variation considers a conspiracy where both collaborate from the outset, with David as the central figure due to his personal connections and Marshall providing operational backing, such as access to properties or vehicles. Here, responsibility could be shared more evenly, with David facing the brunt for any direct actions and Marshall accountable for facilitating the scheme, potentially through his remote oversight that allowed for discrete coordination. In a less likely but possible twist, if Marshall emerges as the more active participant, perhaps motivated by protecting shared business interests, David could be relegated to a passive role, though his ownership of key assets like the vehicle would still implicate him heavily. Across these cases, the distinction hinges on evidence of foreknowledge. If Marshall was aware of underlying risks, like an inappropriate dynamic, his responsibility amplifies from mere helper to co-conspirator, whereas David's prominence and reported associations make him the focal point regardless. Shifting to penalties, the sentences vary by case and jurisdiction, typically under California law, which imposes strict consequences for such offenses. For an intentional act classified as first-degree murder, David could face 25 years to life in state prison, escalating to life without parole or even the death penalty if aggravating factors like a vulnerable victim or special circumstances apply. Marshall, as an accessory after the fact to this level of crime, might receive up to 3 years in prison or probation, though his involvement could add concurrent terms, potentially totaling 5 years if multiple charges stack. In a second-degree murder scenario, still intentional but without premeditation, David's sentence might range from 15 years to life, reflecting malice but lesser planning, while Marshall's accessory role could limit him to 1 to 3 years. Fined additionally up to $10,000. For unintentional cases, such as voluntary manslaughter arising from a sudden quarrel or heat of passion, David could be sentenced to 3, 6, or 11 years in state prison, depending on mitigating factors like lack of prior intent. Marshall's contribution here, focused on post-event aid, would likely result in a lighter penalty of 1 to 3 years for being an accessory, or even probation if his actions are deemed minimal. If the situation qualifies as involuntary manslaughter, stemming from reckless but non-malicious behavior, David might face 2, 3, or 4 years, emphasizing negligence over deliberate harm. Marshall, in this lighter framework, could see his sentence reduced to probation or up to 2 years, particularly if his role is confined to helping obscure rather than causing the outcome. Additional charges complicate the outlook, such as child endangerment, which for David could add up to 6 years if proven to involve creating hazardous conditions for a minor, running concurrently or consecutively with main sentences. Marshall might evade this if his involvement is post-fact, but if linked to enabling the environment, he could face 2 to 4 years. For unlawful sensitive intercourse with a minor, David's potential exposure includes 16 months to 4 years, based on age differences and circumstances, potentially tacked onto homicide-related terms for a cumulative 20-plus years. Marshall, if aware and complicit in facilitating such interactions, might incur accessory penalties of 1 to 3 years, though his denials could mitigate if unsubstantiated. In conspiracy cases, where joint planning is established, both could face enhanced sentences mirroring the principal crime. David up to life for murder-level involvement, and Marshall sharing in that, possibly 15 years to life if his contributions are deemed integral. Fines could compound, with David facing up to $10,000 per count and Marshall similar amounts for accessory roles. Probation remains an option in lesser scenarios, but public scrutiny and victim impact statements often push for maximum terms, especially with underage elements amplifying severity. Plea deals frequently alter outcomes, reducing David's exposure from life to 15-20 years in exchange for cooperation, while Marshall might negotiate down to time served or community service, if portraying himself as peripherally involved. Restitution to the victim's family could add financial burdens, up to thousands for both, emphasizing rehabilitation over pure punishment in non-capital cases. Ultimately, the interplay of intent and evidence dictates the balance, with David's higher profile likely drawing stricter application. David will be arrested. Although no suspects have been confirmed yet, there are currently many police investigative moves pointing towards David, emphasizing that he is very likely a suspect, at least within the investigative agency. The Robbery-Homicide Division of the Los Angeles Police Department has been leading the probe into the circumstances surrounding the Tesla discovery, with a clear emphasis on gathering forensic and digital evidence that could tie back to David. This specialized unit, known for handling high-profile cases, has prioritized a meticulous approach to avoid any missteps, drawing from past experiences where rushed investigations led to complications. Their active involvement underscores a commitment to piecing together a comprehensive timeline, starting from initial reports and extending through detailed analysis of physical items recovered from relevant locations. This methodical strategy reflects broader trends in modern policing, where technology and interagency collaboration play pivotal roles in building airtight cases, especially when dealing with celebrities whose actions attract intense public scrutiny. A key move came on September 18, 2025, when detectives executed a search warrant at David's rented residence on Doney Drive in Hollywood Hills. This operation resulted in the seizure of computers, electronic devices, and various other items believed to hold potential clues. The focus here was on constructing a digital footprint, examining files, messages, and data that might reveal interactions or activities leading up to the incident. Sources familiar with the process indicated that this raid was prompted by preliminary leads suggesting the property's relevance, and the items taken are undergoing thorough forensic examination to uncover any deleted or encrypted information. This step highlights the division's trend toward leveraging advanced digital forensics, a shift seen in recent cases where online histories have proven crucial in establishing patterns or motives. In parallel, investigators have been diligently retracing the sequence of events involving Celeste, amassing a collection of photos, videos, and communications that feature David prominently. These materials span back to 2022, painting a picture of ongoing connections that authorities are scrutinizing for context. The effort involves cross-referencing timestamps and metadata to align with known timelines, demonstrating a trend in investigations where multimedia evidence from personal devices and public sources forms the backbone of reconstructions. This comprehensive gathering aims to clarify any discrepancies, ensuring that every piece fits into a coherent narrative before advancing further. LAPD officials have publicly confirmed David's cooperation in the matter, noting that he has provided statements and access as requested, though he has not been formally named a suspect. This status stems from a current lack of sufficient evidence to elevate him beyond a person of interest, illustrating the department's cautious stance in high-visibility inquiries. By avoiding premature designations, they mitigate risks of legal challenges or public backlash, a lesson drawn from historical cases like the O.J. Simpson trial. This approach signals a broader departmental trend toward evidence-driven progression, prioritizing solid probable cause over speculation fueled by media pressure. Coordination across state lines has also marked the investigation, with LAPD partnering with Houston police to examine David's home in Cypress, Texas. This collaboration was triggered by multiple security alarm activations and swatting incidents at the property, prompting on-site checks to rule out tampering or related activities. Additionally, the transfer of ownership for 2 Texas homes to David's mother has come under review, viewed as a potential move to safeguard assets amid scrutiny. These interstate efforts exemplify a trend in modern law enforcement toward expansive probes that follow financial and property trails, ensuring no avenue is overlooked in piecing together possible motives or cover-ups. Forensic work remains a cornerstone, with ongoing toxicology and laboratory analyses aimed at pinpointing the cause of death, which is still listed as deferred. This delay, while frustrating to observers, aligns with standard protocols for cases involving extended exposure, allowing for precise determinations that could shift the investigation's direction. The focus on linking these results to David's properties and the vehicle underscores a reliance on scientific validation, a growing trend where lab findings often dictate whether a case escalates to homicide classification or remains a death inquiry. Interviews with David's associates form another critical layer, with detectives seeking verifications on relationship details and perceptions of Celeste's age. These sessions have elicited statements from those in his social circle, many expressing surprise upon learning her true age, having believed her to be older based on interactions. This line of questioning reflects a trend toward exploring enabling environments, where enablers or unaware participants provide insights into dynamics that might indicate patterns of behavior or oversight. Property records and lease terminations tied to David's residences have undergone examination, particularly abrupt changes following the search warrant. Investigators are delving into these documents to trace any unusual patterns, such as sudden cancellations that could suggest efforts to distance from incriminating sites. This scrutiny highlights an investigative shift toward financial forensics, where paper trails reveal attempts at evasion or preparation for legal repercussions. The review of travel logs, vehicle sensors, and app alerts from the Tesla represents a high-tech facet of the probe, aiming to map movements and unauthorized accesses. By analyzing this data, detectives hope to reconstruct the vehicle's history, identifying any anomalies that could point to specific individuals or timelines. This reliance on automotive telemetry exemplifies emerging trends in investigations, where connected devices provide objective records that complement witness accounts. There is also potential for expanding the scope to include checks for child endangerment or unlawful interactions, based on elements like the reported age gap and online origins of connections. While not yet formalized, this direction indicates a holistic approach, considering not just the endpoint, but the preceding circumstances that might constitute separate offenses. Turning to those around David who have faced scrutiny, Josh Marshall, his manager, has been investigated indirectly through property records related to the Hollywood Hills leasing. His denial of any knowledge, shared publicly on social media, has been noted, but actions like the post-warrant lease termination have drawn attention, prompting reviews of his involvement in logistical arrangements. Marshall's statements emphasized his remote work style and lack of daily interactions, yet investigators have probed these claims to assess any gaps. Friends and party associates of David have undergone interviews by both LAPD and media outlets like TMZ, offering statements on their beliefs that Celeste was 18 or 19 years old during interactions. These accounts detail social gatherings where she was perceived as an adult companion, with many expressing shock upon discovering her actual age. The questioning has focused on timelines and observations, helping to map out relational dynamics without direct accusations. David's family, including his mother, has seen their Texas home in Cypress checked by Houston police following swatting calls, with asset transfers to her name flagged as potential cover-ups. These moves have been part of broader inquiries into financial maneuvers, ensuring that familial ties do not obscure investigative paths. Discord moderators and Twitch staff from David's online community have had their statements collected, particularly regarding perceptions of Celeste's age and assertions of no awareness that she was missing. These inputs have aided in understanding the digital environment where connections may have formed, without implicating the staff directly. Finally, a private investigator claiming to have recent photos of Celeste has had their assertions verified by LAP to evaluate timeline accuracy. This external lead has been cross-checked against official records, reflecting the department's openness to third-party inputs, while maintaining control over the narrative. Will this case be cold? Overall, the case involving David and the circumstances around Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death could unfold in two primary directions influenced by public pressure, the strength of available evidence, and the patterns seen in handling high-profile matters in Los Angeles. The first path emphasizes a fair and thorough resolution to uphold justice and prevent setting a negative precedent that could invite criticism from the media and the public. The second leans toward a lighter handling, potentially through negotiated outcomes or reclassification, allowing the matter to gradually recede from attention due to evidentiary gaps and a sway of celebrity status. Drawing parallels to similar incidents involving public figures helps illuminate the likelihood of each trajectory, highlighting how societal expectations and legal strategies intersect in such scenarios. Turning to the fair handling approach, authorities pursue a complete investigation and prosecution, imposing strict penalties if guilt is established, all to uphold the principle that no one is above the law, regardless of fame or resources. In this scenario, the Los Angeles Police Department would intensify efforts to build an unassailable case, driven by widespread public outrage manifested through campaigns like Fake Justice for Celeste and extensive media coverage from outlets. The emphasis would be on avoiding perceptions of celebrity privilege, particularly given the sensitive elements involving a minor and alleged relational complexities. Family initiatives, including a GoFundMe for support and public vigils, along with community demands, would compel the district attorney to seek the maximum applicable charges, potentially escalating to serious offenses if confirmed, or at minimum addressing endangerment or inappropriate conduct with a young person. Transparency would be key, with regular updates to the public and a fully open trial process to demonstrate accountability and deter future leniency in similar situations. This rigorous path aligns with broader trends in the justice system where high-visibility cases demand exhaustive scrutiny to maintain public trust. Prosecutors would likely draw on digital records, forensic analysis, and witness accounts to construct a narrative that leaves no room for doubt, ensuring that any resolution sets a standard for equality under the law. The goal would be to counteract criticisms that the system favors the influential, fostering a precedent where thoroughness prevails over expediency. Media amplification would play a dual role, both pressuring officials to decisively and highlighting the proceedings to educate the public on the importance of unwavering enforcement. Comparing this potential outcome to analogous celebrity cases underscores its feasibility. For instance, the prosecution of R. Kelly in 2021 following decades of allegations involving underage sex trafficking resulted in a 30-year prison sentence largely due to sustained public pressure and the momentum from the Me Too movement. That case established a strong precedent against celebrity impunity, as federal authorities compiled extensive evidence from multiple victims and digital trails, refusing to let the matter dissipate despite the defendant's fame. Similarly, Harvey Weinstein's 2020 conviction for assault, leading to a 23-year sentence, avoided creating a bad precedent in the wake of Hollywood scandals by relying on a thorough investigation and testimonies from numerous accusers. In both instances, the systems faced intense scrutiny, but responded with comprehensive trials that prioritized victim justice, setting examples that could influence how this current matter proceeds if the fair handling direction is taken. These parallels suggest that when public and media forces align, authorities are compelled to pursue full accountability, transforming potential controversies into benchmarks for reform. In pursuing this fair resolution, the investigative body would likely expand its scope to include all peripheral elements, ensuring no aspect is overlooked. This could involve cross-jurisdictional cooperation to trace financial movements or property changes, reflecting a commitment to transparency that wards off accusations of bias. The district attorney's office would aim for charges that match the gravity of the allegations, potentially incorporating enhancements for vulnerable parties, to signal that such cases warrant the fullest extent of legal rigor. Public updates through press conferences or official statements would maintain engagement, countering any narrative of favoritism and reinforcing the system's integrity. The drive to avoid a negative precedent would also manifest in courtroom strategies, where prosecutors might seek jury instructions emphasizing equal treatment, drawing on societal shifts toward holding powerful figures accountable. Victim impact statements, amplified by family advocacy, would humanize the proceedings, further insulating the process from criticism. This holistic approach not only addresses immediate justice, but also contributes to long-term deterrence, discouraging similar oversights in future high-profile inquiries. Ultimately, this direction would hinge on the strength of compiled evidence, with forensic results playing a pivotal role in classification. If aligned with public expectations, it could elevate the case as a model for equitable handling, echoing the transformative effects seen in prior landmark convictions. By committing to thoroughness, officials would mitigate risks of backlash, fostering confidence in the judicial process amid ongoing debates about celebrity influence. In the alternative direction, the matter could resolve with minimal charges, such as those related to concealing evidence or endangering a minor, carrying sentences of 1 to 3 years or even probation, negotiated through a plea agreement to sidestep the risks of a full trial that might end in failure. This lighter touch would stem from gaps in direct proof, like an undetermined origin of events and no formal person of interest, allowing the inquiry to wind down without escalation. The deliberate slow tempo of the Los Angeles Police Department, evident in the absence of detentions despite various pointers, aligns with a strategy to manage resources carefully in prominent inquiries, where rushing could invite errors. Coupled with the sway of fame, bolstered by retaining a prominent attorney like Burke, the outcome leaned toward a reduced penalty, after which attention drifts as news stories capture headlines, letting the episode slip into quiet obscurity, much like numerous scandals involving public figures, particularly if lab findings point away from deliberate harm. This pathway reflects a pragmatic trend in the justice system, where prosecutors opt for sure, albeit smaller, wins over ambitious pursuits that could collapse under scrutiny. By securing a plea, officials avoid the spectacle of a courtroom battle, preserving credibility while addressing core concerns without overextending. Media cycles, ever hungry for fresh narratives, would accelerate the fade, shifting focus to emerging controversies and leaving the original one to linger only in niche discussions. The influence of celebrity status plays a key role here, enabling access to top legal talent that negotiates favorable terms, a pattern seen repeatedly where wealth and visibility tilt scales toward leniency, ensuring the individual can eventually rebuild without perpetual stigma. Drawing parallels to comparable situations underscores how such resolutions unfold. The O.J. Simpson trial in 1995, marred by procedural stumbles, ended in acquittal amid massive uproar, but the ensuing civil suit loss and relentless public debate allowed the criminal aspect to recede over time, though it never fully vanished from cultural memory. That episode highlighted how fumbled prosecutions lead to lighter criminal repercussions, with media frenzy peaking then waning, mirroring potential dynamics here, where initial heat gives way to gradual disinterest. Similarly, Michael Jackson's 2005 acquittal on charges involving minors came after intense examination, yet lingering doubts persisted without further action, and the matter largely faded following his passing in 2009, illustrating how celebrity cases often dissolve into historical footnotes once legal hurdles are cleared. Public fascination ebbs as new icons emerge, a trend that could apply if this inquiry concludes modestly. Bill Cosby's trajectory offers another insight. Convicted in 2018 for assault but released in 2021 on a technicality after initial imprisonment, with the episode gradually slipping from front-page status despite early widespread condemnation. That release, rooted in procedural flaws, exemplified how even convictions can unravel, leading to diminished sentences and eventual public amnesia as attention scatters. These examples reveal a common thread: high-profile inquiries, fueled by outrage, often pivot to restrained outcomes to mitigate risks of reversal or backlash, allowing the figures involved to navigate lighter consequences while the collective memory moves on. In Cosby's situation, the initial vigor from multiple accusers waned post-release, underscoring how legal technicalities facilitate fade-outs, a blueprint that might echo here if evidence thresholds aren't met. This lighter resolution could involve behind-the-scenes negotiations, where defense teams leverage gaps, like unresolved scientific analyses, to broker deals that prioritize rehabilitation over punishment. Prosecutors, wary of high-stakes defeats, might accept such arrangements to claim some measure of accountability, aligning with a trend toward efficiency in overloaded systems. Media, once saturated with details, would pivot to fresher content, hastening the oblivion as algorithms favor novelty over sustained coverage. The celebrity factor amplifies this, with public relations efforts reshaping narratives post-resolution. ensuring the episode becomes a distant echo rather than a defining mark. Family and community voices, while influential at the outset, might see their impact diluted if the legal path veers toward minimalism as resources shift elsewhere. Yet, this doesn't erase the underlying push for closure. Instead, it channels it into civil avenues or advocacy, much like in past instances where criminal leniency spurred alternative pursuits. The slow investigative rhythm, prioritizing precision over speed, feeds into this, allowing time for passions to cool and details to blur, facilitating a quiet subsidence. Overall, this direction embodies a balanced pragmatism, where justice systems weigh the costs of pursuit against achievable outcomes, often opting for subdued resolutions in celebrity contexts to maintain operational flow. As seen in the referenced cases, initial storms give way to calmer seas, with the passage of time acting as the ultimate eraser, leaving only faint traces in archival discussions. The case surrounding D4VD and the tragic death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez serves as a stark lesson in the pitfalls of investigative tunnel vision, where an overemphasis on one prominent figure can obscure the broader truth. From the outset, public and media scrutiny zeroed in on D4VD due to circumstantial ties like the Tesla's registration and reported personal connections, creating a narrative that painted him as the central villain. However, this intense focus risks sidelining other angles, much like how high-profile cases often devolve into spectacles rather than thorough quests for justice. It reminds us that rushing to judgment on a single suspect, especially a celebrity, can lead to incomplete probes, where alternative explanations, such as accomplices or framing scenarios, get overlooked. In this instance, the absence of direct evidence against D4VD, despite months of leads, highlights how fixation can delay resolutions and erode public trust in the system. A key takeaway is the necessity for comprehensive, multifaceted investigations that cast a wide net rather than narrowing prematurely. Authorities must meticulously examine all relationships and networks, as seen in the scrutiny of figures like Josh Marshall, whose managerial role and property dealings raised questions about potential involvement in cover-ups. By delving into these connections, property leases, financial transfers, and social circles, investigators can uncover hidden dynamics that might explain anomalies, such as the vehicle's abandonment or delayed discoveries. This holistic approach prevents the loss of critical threads, ensuring that no stone's left unturned. For example, exploring digital footprints from years back or cross-state activities could reveal patterns of behavior or enablers that a suspect-centric lens might miss, fostering a more equitable pursuit of facts. Equally crucial is a rigorous scrutiny of motives, which demands careful dissection beyond surface assumptions. In complex cases like this, motives aren't always straightforward. They could stem from personal entanglements, professional pressures, or even opportunistic framing by outsiders aware of vulnerabilities. Probing these drivers, through financial audits, witness interviews, and psychological profiles, helps differentiate between intent, negligence, or innocence. Overlooking this can perpetuate biases, where fame amplifies suspicion without substantiation, as evidenced by the lingering doubts despite no arrests. A balanced inquiry into motives ensures that justice isn't swayed by public clamor, but grounded in verifiable intent. Yet, with the case still unresolved, no official cause of death determined and investigations ongoing, it's essential to approach discussions with respect for all involved. The family of Celeste deserves empathy amid their grief, while those under scrutiny, like D4VD and his associates, merit the presumption innocence until proven otherwise. These reflections remain personal viewpoints, drawn from available details, and should not preempt official findings. Ultimately, this situation underscores the value of patience and breadth in justice, reminding us that true resolution comes from seeing the full picture, not just the most visible suspect.